You know, when you click an icon or type a sentence, thousands of things happen in a split second. It's this super complex machine with countless moving parts. But who's actually running the show? Well, that's what we're going to dig into. And it's a really good question, isn't it? I mean, you'd think you're the one in charge. You're clicking the mouse, right? But nope. Behind the curtain, there's this master manager pulling all the strings, making sure your web browser and your games all run smoothly. The absolute best way to picture this manager is to think of a conductor of this huge, sprawling digital orchestra. Every single piece of your computer, the hardware, the software, they're all just instruments. And this maestro makes sure they're all playing in perfect harmony. And that maestro, that's your operating system. Yeah, the OS is basically the ultimate translator. It's the go-between. You give it a simple request, like, hey, open this file, and it takes that and translates it into a language the physical hardware can actually understand. I mean, without it, you'd be trying to talk directly to silicon chips. And trust me, that is a conversation nobody wants to have. Okay, so right at the very heart of the OS, the absolute core, is something called the kernel. Now, if the OS is our conductor, then the kernel, well, the kernel is the baton. It's what the conductor uses to direct the really critical parts of the performance, deciding who gets to use resources and when. All right, so if we've got a conductor, we're going to need musicians, right? So who are the musicians in this digital orchestra? Well, they're all the programs you use every single day. Let's take a look at how our conductor, the OS, actually manages them. So anytime you launch an app, let's say you open up your web browser, you've just created what's called a process. And in our orchestra analogy, a process is like an entire section. Think of the entire string section, all the violins, the cellos, the whole group. It's a big, independent unit working on a major piece of the music. But think about it. Inside that browser process, you've probably got a bunch of tabs open, right? Well, each one of those tabs could be its own separate thread. A thread is the individual musician inside that section. They're still part of that bigger group, the process, but they're each playing their own little specific part of the tune. And this difference is super important. You'll hear people call processes heavyweight. That's because they're totally independent, with their own private memory space. It makes them safe, but talking between them is kind of slow. Threads, on the other hand, are lightweight. They all share memory with each other inside the same process, which means they can talk and work together way, way faster. Okay, so every orchestra needs a stage, right? A place to perform. For your computer, that stage is your RAM, your physical memory. But here's the problem. That stage is almost always too small for the massive performance you want to put on. So, how does the conductor solve this? Well, the OS has this absolutely brilliant trick up its sleeve called virtual memory. What it does is it borrows a piece of your hard drive or your SSD and pretends it's more RAM. It creates this amazing illusion of a much, much bigger memory space. It's like having a super clever stage manager who's constantly swapping performers and props in and out from the wings, making the stage seem way bigger than it actually is. Now, this system is fantastic, but it is not perfect. I mean, what happens when you've got way too much stuff open and that poor stage manager is just running around like crazy, swapping things back and forth constantly? Well, what you get is a state called thrashing, and you've probably felt this. It's when your computer gets so bogged down swapping data, these little pages of memory, between the fast stage, which is RAM, and the slow backstage, your disk, that it has literally no time left to do any actual work. Your computer slows to a crawl, not because it's busy performing, but because it's spending all its energy just shuffling things around. You know that incredibly frustrating lag you get sometimes where everything just freezes for a second? Yep, that's thrashing. That's the sound of the stage crew just completely overwhelmed, frantically shuffling performers around, while you, the audience, are just sitting there waiting for the show to continue. All right, so we've got our musicians, the processes and threads, and we've got our stage, which is memory. But there's one more really critical piece. The spotlight. In our analogy, the spotlight is the CPU, the brain of the computer. And here's the catch. There's only one spotlight. So the problem is this. You've got dozens, maybe even hundreds of musicians, all wanting to be in that one spotlight. How do you share it fairly? Well, the conductor's solution is something called CPU scheduling. It's basically a set of rules for deciding who gets the spotlight next, and for how long they get to keep it. And there are a bunch of different ways to do this. You've got first come, first served, which is exactly what it sounds like. Just get in line. Shortest job next tries to be smart and lets the quick jobs go first. Priority scheduling lets the VIP musicians cut the line, And then you have one that's super common in pretty much every modern OS. And that's round robin. This one is all about being fair. The idea is simple. The conductor gives every single musician a tiny little slice of time in the spotlight. It's called a quantum. If they're not done when their time is up, too bad. They go to the back of the line and wait for their turn again. This whole cycle happens so incredibly fast that it creates the illusion that everyone is performing at the same time. Now, all of these strategies pretty much fall into two main styles of conducting. First, you have preemptive scheduling. Think of this as a very strict conductor. They can literally interrupt a musician mid-performance and say, "Nope, you're done, let's get someone more important in here." Then you have non-preemptive scheduling. This is a much more chill conductor. Once a musician gets the spotlight, they get to keep it until they're either totally finished or they decide to take a break on their own. Okay, last but definitely not least, the conductor has one final, absolutely critical job: preventing total, utter chaos. I'm serious, they have to make sure the musicians aren't tripping over each other, stealing each other's instruments, or worse, bringing the whole performance to a grinding halt. And the ultimate form of this chaos has a name. It's called a deadlock. This is a digital traffic jam of the worst kind. It's where two or more processes get completely stuck, totally frozen, because each one is waiting for something the other one has. Nothing can move. The whole system just stops. Now, for a deadlock to actually happen, four very specific things have to be true all at once. First, resources have to be exclusive. Only one process can use it at a time. Second, a process has to be holding on to one resource while waiting for another one. Third, you can't just snatch a resource away from a process. And finally, you get this circular wait, where one process is waiting for a second, which is waiting for the first. Let me give you a really simple way to picture this. Imagine the trumpeter needs the flutist sheet music, but the flutist needs the trumpeter's music stand. The trumpeter won't give up the stand, and the flutist won't give up the music. So what happens? Nothing. Just silence. That's a deadlock. And really, that is the incredible job of the operating system. It's this unseen conductor, juggling the musicians, managing the stage, sharing the spotlight, and doing it all just to prevent that kind of chaos. It's what turns a bunch of separate, noisy parts into one beautiful, working symphony. So hey, the next time you turn on your computer and everything just works flawlessly, just for a second, listen. Listen closely. Because you're not just using a machine, you're actually witnessing a masterpiece performance directed by the true, unsung hero of your digital life. The question is, can you hear the symphony?